So my friend that gave me my PDP11 23 that the previous videos were on also gave me this, and both of these were picked up by him at a recycling day, computer surplus recycling day, and while he was bringing lots of things in, he picked a couple of things back up. And so he's never actually used either of these. My getting the 1123 to work and bringing up the pharmacy software was a real surprise for both of us. And this machine is, at least to me, a total unknown. So I thought perhaps we could do a bit of investigation together, see what we can find out, see if we can get it to start. The machine is branded Cambridge Digital, you can see on the badge here. Which is not a manufacturer that I have heard of. It is clearly a bunch of off-the-shelf parts that have been put together, but it looks pretty professional. He was under the impression that this was a PDP11. I don't know why he thought that. I haven't asked, so I'm going to start from, well, pretty much nothing. If we look at the front, we've got our badge, we've got a rather large tape drive, and we have our front panel here. We've got a halt enable, boot, LTC on and off, a power switch, and then a DC on and a run light. The run light my 1134A has, so maybe that's the same, maybe it isn't, I'm not sure. If I release the camera, we've got our tape drive. We have a rather large, I guess that's an 8-inch hard disk, and as you can see, pretty sizable in physical construction. Wow, hell, it's bigger than a tape drive, for goodness sake. And then a card cage, and if I can get my scone out of the way, sure looks like a Q-bus card cage to me. Smells serially. Looks like a disk controller, and processor board, I guess. I've not seen one like that before. We have power supply, just a regular IEC in, a couple outlets, a bog standard 19-inch case, really. You'll see that there are no cables for the drives. They are missing. If they came with him, he has no idea where they are. We have a couple of bits and pieces, some power cabling, ribbons to front panels, nothing up there but the big power cable. That's about it. But he must have been relatively sure of himself. Let's have a look what we've got. Nope. Well, these are pretty big. But there's nothing like that on here. This would have been for a chassis rail. We've got screws that mount in some of the internal components. Hell, that one's loose. That's reassuring. And these, a clip of some sort. I guess the obvious conclusion from that is that it would have had a cover at one point, which, you know, had fingers that would have been screwed on, maybe a clip at this end to hold it in place. This is a cable retaining bar, and you would, if you had like external devices, printers, or certainly disk drives, you'd have your controller cards in here, and then the cables would run out underneath the retention bar, and then you'd crank them down to hold them in place. And so when your cover was on, you weren't smashing them, and that way they weren't flopping about, although once they're rack mounted, God only knows where they'd be flopping about. So I'm not quite sure what these are. Some nice washers here. These little things are teeny tiny and don't match any of these, so I don't know what the hell that is. And a 5¼ inch floppy drive slip. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that doesn't relate. Well, this is a list of disk drive types, and then presumably some dip switch settings. RKO5 is a cartridge style drive. I guess cartridge is a name for it. Big sort of 24-inch in diameter thing that you would slide into the drive, and it had a single 14-inch platter. RLO1 and RLO2s were similar, but you lifted the cover up and the pack went inside. I believe they had 2 surfaces. I actually have a pair of RLO2 drives in New Zealand. Fat lot of good that does me now. T58 is a tape drive. RXO1 and RXO2 are floppy drives. It's an 8-inch floppy drive. I think it's a Shugart mechanism. And RXO1 is a single drive enclosure, and then this is an RXO2, and you'll see it's got the 2 drives. And that goes to my 1134, so it does not go to this, and that's not a floppy drive controller. Presumably it goes to these. But I don't know what those dip switches go to. Let's see. Come here. CPU diag, MAME diag, DECnet. Well, that sure as hell sounds digital, doesn't it? Interactive boot on and off, S1 through S8. Well, this is 5, 6, 7, 8. 5, 6, 7, 8. Well, that certainly smells PDP, doesn't it? But let's see. That is quite interesting. Look at that. I don't think I've seen anything like that before. There's some jumpers here and here. There's a block that's filled in. Some random ones. But there's certainly no dip switch block on this, is there? Most curious. Ooh. 1 through 10. 1 through 6. Another big jumper set. Dunno. Well, I guess we should start taking things apart and see what we actually have here. So I've dismantled things to their component pieces, which was not quite as easy as it could have been. The designers clearly did not make this to be easy to maintain. First we have the power supply unit, all of the connectors. I have labelled them, as you can see: front panel, card cage, tape, and hard disk. This one is spare currently. Interior of the unit. This went to the fan on the back of the card cage. And here we have connectors J1 and J2, which go to the front panel and the card cage. I've got the inside of the chassis. I've left the tape drive in for now. We have J1, and at the moment I've got J2 removed. Here is the card cage itself. So we have the fan that blows across the cards. We have the power connectors that go to the power supply. Our connector that goes to the power supply, which passes data back and forth, DC OK signals, things like that. And then the cage itself. We have a plastic backing plate to ensure that there's no shorting of components. And as you can see, I've got all of the cards removed right now. The supply was connected to the chassis through 4 bolts around the outside perimeter, and then there are 2 on the underneath. And I have returned all of those to the chassis, to the power supply, so that I can remember where the heck they go. It won't go in with the bolts in it, so if I've forgotten, like the 2 on the bottom, and it won't slide in, then I can flip it over, see that it's sticking out, and remember. The card cage connected to the outside of the chassis through 4 holes with 4 bolts, with these little standoffs here. The chassis itself is just a folded steel affair. You can see there's been some corrosion, which I've been cleaning up as I find it. There's the front panel itself, and then the tape drive, and finally the hard disk. And although this is a very sizable, or relatively sizable linear supply, it weighs possibly 20 pounds. And the hard disk in this weighs at least 30, possibly going up to 40. I haven't pulled my bathroom scales out. And you can see that it is a sizable affair. It's a very heavy steel mounting bracket. And if I slide it around, our connectors. So this would have faced to the rear. So now that we have things apart so that we can easily identify them, we need to start making notes as to what the hell we're looking at. So the first thing is we have our Cambridge digital, and I've grabbed the model number. The card cage is manufactured by, if I flip it over, well, that's a little wee plastic shield, that's terrible, I'm doing horrible things to it with one hand. There we go. Manufactured by Sigma. And the tape drive itself is made by, let's go on the right side here. So this is CPI, Computer Peripherals Inc. We have a model number. Sorry about that. And then we have the hard disk itself. And if we do this, we can see that it is a Fujitsu model M2312K. So this is the major hardware. We then have the boards. So we'll start with the processor board, and you can see immediately that it has a big chunk of RAM, a bunch of control logic, and then two very large, and they may be GALs or ASICs, I'm not sure. The model name and manufacturers up here, Crislin Industries CI1173EDC. I've never heard of Crislin Industries, but 1173 certainly sounds like 1173 as in a PDP 1173. So for now, I'm confident that's what that is. You'll note there is some moulding, as in of the fungi variety, on the chips, or the memory chips. I have not seen this before. I don't know what the hell they're living on, and I'm not entirely sure how to clean it yet. I suspect some thorough work with some isopropyl alcohol and maybe some electrical contact cleaner should clear it up. Next we have the hard disk hard disk and tape drive controller. And now I know this is a controller because it is an Emulex, and that's what Emulex primarily make, is controllers. More than that, I know what kind of controller it is without even having to look it up, because I know what this is. This is an SMD controller. You have the data channel, which is a 60-pin cable, and it daisy chains between the devices. And then you have the two 26-pin control channels, and so one will go to one drive and one will go to the other. So this will support two drives. Slide it around, you can see it gives a ROM name, serial number, and here with boot, so that immediately suggests that it has the boot strap in this card. So when you bring the system up and jump to the appropriate bootloader, the bootstrap code's in the card, that'll chain off one of the drives. Nicely numbered ROMs here. We have a model number at the top, SU02104001, with a serial number 3532, I believe that says. You'll note that that is handwritten in ink. And then we have this, and I did see that there was a name on the back, Technical Magic, and I figured that was the manufacturer of the handle, but in the middle here, 1982 Technical Magic ink. Now this is a serial card. I've not seen this manufactured before either, but with 4 ports like this and there being no serial ports on the processor board, that's what this must be. You see you've got 4 ports and there'll be 4 serial UARTs here. We have dips and jumpers for controlling baud rate, parity, stop bits, all those sorts of things, as well as device addressing in the memory. I should also mention that this is obviously a single board computer. Usually the 11s would have at least a digital manufacturer 11 would have a processor board and then a memory board and so on. And this has got both on the same board. It's possible digital made a single board computer. I imagine it would have been for some of their later, not embedded machines, but like the DiskStation and things like that where everything was on board. This is, with its card bus like that, I don't think this is something that digital would have done, ignoring the fact that we know it's made by Crislin, who obviously isn't digital. So that is of some interest. So now we know what everything is, and I have it all noted down on my piece of paper. We shall go to the interwebs and work out what the hell we're looking at here. I've learned something about these boards and the peripherals here, although not a heap. I can find plenty of mention of Crislin Industries as a manufacturer. I cannot find any documentation on any boards. Emulex is well documented, but this particular model is not. And my primary Bible is the BitSavers site, which has both software and documentation for vast numbers of vintage systems. If you're looking for something for a vintage system, BitSavers is the first place you should head. The SU02 model they have nothing for, but the SC02 model SMD Emulex controller they do. And from the pictures in the manual, it looks exactly like this. So I'm not entirely positive what the differences are yet, but the board layout is visually identical. So I have at least something that I can make some good assumptions from. The Technical Magic serial board, I cannot find the model board for the 4S, but there is a board for its bigger brother, the 8S, which, as the name would suggest, has 8 serial ports on it, and it has 8 UARTs on it. It is also a dual height board like this is, so again, it's not exactly the same, but it does have dip switch settings and things like that, so there's a good base that I can start working from. I also noticed that like this one, which has the serial number written in ink, this one has it scratched into the board, 1018, which is kind of cute. This Fujitsu, I believe it's a Swift or a Hork, is, like I guessed, an SMD drive. Apparently they are known for longevity and reliability. If there's something on this, I would be really surprised, but they do have a really good rap, so we may get lucky. I couldn't find anything on the tape drive, except I believe it is a Quick 24 tape drive. The card-cade manufacturer I couldn't get too much on. Cambridge Digital I couldn't find squat on. So I believe what I'm going to do next is plug things in and see if in the default configuration state, so what it was left as whenever it was turned off by whoever owned it, it's still able to function on. But before I do that, I want to make absolutely certain that I'm not going to blow this thing all to hell. And so what I've started with is a visual inspection. Go grab one with some light here. Of the componentry. You'll see it has a logic board below, nice big bus bar here, and then all the parts for the linear supply, the big transformer, and then flip it around. Oh, come on. There we go. We have all of the large capacitors for smoothing out the signal, and more of the logic board. The logic in this is related to the logic required by the PDP cards. So not only do you have the toggle switches on the front, which soft powered on, this thing doesn't have like a large relay attached, it's a digital on, but also it needs to provide signal to the PDP board telling it that the AC is okay, the DC is okay, and that things are ready to start. The J1 and J2 connectors comes from the front panel to the power supply, back from the power supply to the card cage. So there are signals that are passing through this. Now I hit it with a continuity meter and some of them line up. I think I've got 2 out of 10. So best guess is some of them are direct, but most of them there's logic on board that controls it. For example, the DC OK, obviously only the power supply is going to be able to verify that. So the power supply in the 74 series logic is going to generate that signal. So I want to test the supply, and after the visual inspection and nothing looks like it's cooked off or exploded, there's no scorch marks, there's no funny smells, of course for what that does given my PDP1123 experience, I want to power it on without having it connected to anything and check the voltage coming out of the outputs.